this story comes from Joe, who explains that this is actually not his story, but it's his father's story, from when his father was a little boy of 11 or 12 years old. Now, his father, Ed, lived in a really small house. It was just his parents and him and his two brothers. One night, Ed's parents had gone to Jamie's feast with some other people, leaving the three boys home alone to tend the sheep. So that night, as the boys are getting ready for bed, the dogs start going crazy outside. But they just thought it was some coyotes or something, so they just told the dogs to be quiet. And as they're trying to drift off to sleep, the dogs still are howling outside, so the kids are just telling him to shut up. And they finally do fall asleep for a while. But when Ed woke up a few hours later, everything was quiet. All he could hear was the breathing and the snoring of his brothers. But Ed needed to use the outhouse, so he woke up one of his brothers to take him there. And his brother was teasing him about being scared to go out there by himself. And Ed was scared to go out there by himself. So both boys get up, his brother grabs a flashlight, and they go outside to the outhouse. And once again, the dogs start going crazy, and they're bounding all over the place outside, running around in the sagebrush. And his brother says he's going to use the outhouse first, so his brother goes in. And Ed is just standing outside waiting for him. So while he's waiting, Ed is trying to follow one of the dogs with the flashlight. And suddenly, there's this super loud whine from one of the dogs. Everything went quiet. Too quiet for that time of night. Not even the sheep were making noise. Then all of a sudden, all the dogs start going nuts over by their truck. And Ed looks over and he sees a man. And this man was unbelievably tall. So tall that he was leaning his arm on the top of the cab of the truck. And he was looking down at the dogs for a few seconds, and then he kicked one of them, and they all scattered in different directions. And then the man looked at Ed, and Ed saw its face. It had a pure white face, like the full moon, 2 burning red eyes, and a slight smile that was pure black. Ed couldn't move or make a sound. And the man started to walk toward him in these unbelievably long strides until it was towering right over him. And all Ed began to see was dark blood red. But he kept getting deeper and deeper into the man's eyes. And he could faintly hear his brother coming out of the outhouse. And the thing evidently heard that too, because it turned to look at Ed's brother. And that is when reality came crashing back to Ed. And Ed looked at his brother and noticed that his brother was too preoccupied with his buckle to see what was going on. And he also noticed that this thing had long hands hovering just inches from his head. Its skin was black ash, and it smelled like a dead, bloated animal in summertime. And Ed was unable to move or speak as he watched this thing move closer to his brother. And when his brother finally did notice this thing, he became paralyzed just like Ed was. And as this thing got closer and closer to Ed's brother, something inside of Ed finally snapped, and he just got unbelievably angry. He broke from his trance and lunged at the Skinwalker with his arms in the air like a wild animal, baring his teeth at it. And a growl came out of him that he never knew he could make. And he just got angrier and angrier at this thing that was trying to hurt them. And the thing was still smiling at first, but the angrier that Ed got, the more that smile started to fade. And finally, with everything that Ed had in him, he started to make this primal roar that just welled up from deep inside of him. And he roared at this thing. And the thing fell backwards and ran off into the night. But before it disappeared, it took one last glance back at Ed. And Ed could see that its eyes were now glowing very dimly, and it wasn't smiling any longer. And if this episode managed to just whet your appetite, click here for full creepy satisfaction. And we will see you again on the In-Between.